What if I told you the reason we stopped using magic wasn't because we couldn't handle it, but because the universe couldn't handle us? The aliens thought we were primitive, until we reminded them why magic is best left forgotten. The first contact with the Tellurians was not what anyone on Earth had imagined. For decades, humanity had dreamed of advanced alien civilizations, hoping for shared knowledge, interstellar alliances, or at least proof that we weren't alone in the cosmos. When the Tellurians arrived, shimmering with silver skin and eyes that glowed like miniature suns, they didn't come bearing gifts or weapons. They came with smug curiosity. Their mothership hovered silently above Earth's surface, its sleek metallic frame stretching miles across the horizon. From it descended their envoys, humanoid in form but clearly superior in every measurable way. They walked with an air of confidence, borderline arrogance, as if stepping onto the soil of a lesser race. Their leader, a tall figure whose voice resonated without speaking, introduced themselves in perfect English. "We are the Tellurians, explorers of the stars, preservers of knowledge. Your planet intrigues us. Primitive as you are, your species shows potential. We are here to evaluate." The humans who stood before them, scientists, diplomats, and military officials, were not sure how to respond. It wasn't every day you were called primitive by beings who could travel faster than light and bend gravity to their will. Yet there was something odd about their condescension, a tone that suggested they weren't just observing humanity's technology or culture. They were looking for something else. Days turned into weeks as the Tellurians toured Earth, visiting our cities, studying our people, and probing our history. Their technology was unlike anything humanity had ever seen: floating devices that scanned vast amounts of data in seconds, drones that constructed towering observation posts in mere hours, and machines capable of translating any language instantly. And yet, for all their advancements, there was a tension beneath their superior demeanor. It wasn't fear exactly, but unease, like they were looking for something they couldn't quite find. It all came to a head during a meeting at the United Nations. The Tellurians, having completed their evaluation, announced their verdict. "You have potential," their leader declared, standing before the gathered representatives of Earth. "But your species is stagnant. Your reliance on crude technology and mechanical progress has hindered your evolution. Where is your connection to the greater energies of the universe? Where is your understanding of the fundamental forces that bind existence?" The room fell silent. Nobody had an answer, though the question itself seemed strange. The Tellurians continued, their glowing eyes scanning the humans before them. "Other civilizations we have encountered wield forces beyond your comprehension. Manipulating matter, bending time, harnessing energies you cannot even perceive. And yet you, a species with such promise, remain shackled to your primitive machines. Why?" The silence grew heavier, until one voice finally broke it. "You're asking about magic," said an older man, his voice calm but firm. He was Dr. Elias Vance, a historian of human mythology in ancient civilizations. Most had dismissed his presence at the talks as ceremonial. After all, what use was an expert on ancient lore in a discussion about alien technology? But now, all eyes were on him. The Tellurian leader tilted their head, curious. "Magic," they repeated, as if testing the word. "Yes. Your species has records of such practices. Rituals, incantations, manipulation of energies. But these are nothing more than myths, are they not?" Dr. Vance leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "They're not myths. They're history." The room erupted in murmurs, but Vance ignored them. He kept his eyes locked on the Tellurian leader. "You've read our records, haven't you?" Vance continued. "You've seen the stories of ancient civilizations, of sorcerers, shamans, and gods. You've seen the tales of cities that vanished overnight, of storms that destroyed armies, of powers that defied explanation. And you think we're primitive because we don't do those things anymore." The Tellurian leader nodded slowly. Precisely. If such practices were real, why would you abandon them? Why would you regress? Vance's expression darkened, and for a moment, the weight of centuries seemed to settle on his shoulders. Because we had to. The murmurs in the room stopped. The Tellurians exchanged glances, their unease growing. What do you mean? The leader asked, their voice quieter now. Vance took a deep breath. There's a reason we stopped using magic. A reason we buried it, erased it, and pretended it was never real. It's not that we couldn't wield it, it's that we couldn't control it. Magic wasn't just a tool or a power. It was alive, a force with its own will. And the more we used it, the more it used us. The Tellurians stared at him, their glowing eyes flickering. For the first time since their arrival, they seemed unsure of themselves. You're lying, the leader said, though their voice lacked conviction. Vance shook his head. We reached a point where our greatest minds realized the truth: magic wasn't advancing us. It was corrupting us. Every great civilization that mastered it fell, consumed by the very forces they sought to command. Atlantis, Lemuria, countless others, they didn't vanish by chance. They were erased when their magic turned against them. So we made a choice, Vance continued. We sealed it away. We gave up the power to protect our future. And we never looked back. The Tellurians were silent, their arrogance replaced by something far more human: doubt. But if that's true, the leader said finally, why are there no traces of this magic? No evidence beyond your myths? Vance's lips curled into a grim smile. Because we didn't just bury it. We made sure it could never be found. The seals, the wards, the barriers, we put everything we had into locking magic away. And if you've been watching us as closely as you say, you'll know one thing: we're very, very good at keeping it hidden. The tension in the room was palpable. The Tellurians, so confident in their superiority, now looked like children who had wandered too far into the dark. Perhaps, the leader said slowly, we underestimated you. Vance leaned back, his expression calm but unyielding. You wouldn't be the first. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then the Tellurians turned and left the room, their movements hurried, their composure shaken. As they exited, Vance glanced at the gathered humans around him. They came here thinking we were primitive, he said quietly. And now they know why we stopped using magic. Let's hope they don't try to find out more. The Tellurians didn't heed Dr. Vance's warning. Curiosity, arrogance, or desperation, it didn't matter what drove them. What mattered was that they went too far. Weeks after their departure, strange phenomena began surfacing across the planet. Storms that appeared without warning. Ancient ruins glowing with unearthly light. Animals acting in strange, unnatural ways. Vance, along with a team of historians and scientists, quickly realized what was happening: the Tellurians had found one of the seals. The seals were never meant to be touched, let alone tampered with. They were ancient constructs, created at the peak of humanity's magical understanding. Each seal held a fragment of the raw, chaotic force that was magic, unpredictable, alive, and devastating. For millennia, they had lain dormant, hidden away in places no human dared approach. But the Tellurians had no fear of such things. They thought their technology could control what humanity had chosen to abandon. They were wrong. The seal they broke was in the heart of the Amazon rainforest, buried beneath layers of earth and stone. When it shattered, it didn't just release magic, it unleashed chaos. Rivers boiled, trees twisted into grotesque shapes, and the sky turned a sickly shade of crimson. Creatures long forgotten by time clawed their way back into existence, and the air itself seemed to hum with malevolence. And that was just the beginning. From his office in Geneva, Dr. Vance watched the reports flood in. The magical energy released from the Amazon was spreading, awakening dormant seals around the globe. One by one, the barriers humanity had constructed began to fall. Ancient powers, terrifying, uncontrollable, were returning. The Tellurians, for all their advancements, were utterly unprepared. Their ships, their technology, even their physical forms were no match for the primal forces they had unleashed. In one broadcast, a Tellurian mothership was shown being torn apart by what looked like a living storm. A vortex of lightning and wind that moved with purpose, as if it had a mind of its own. It wasn't long before the Tellurians realized their mistake. Their leader, the same being who had once called humanity primitive, now appeared on a global transmission. Gone was their arrogance, in its place was fear. "We did not understand," they said, their voice trembling. "We underestimated the forces at play. You must help us. You must contain this." Vance stood in the United Nations chamber, watching the broadcast alongside the world's leaders. He shook his head slowly. "Help you? You're the ones who broke the seal. You were warned." "We thought you were lying," the Tellurian leader admitted. "We thought your myths were exaggerations. But now we see, the truth is far worse." Vance turned to the leaders around him. "We have to act. If we don't, magic will consume everything, our world, their ships, the universe itself." The seals weren't just to protect humanity. They were to protect existence. "But what can we do?" one of the leaders asked. "If the seals are breaking, how do we stop it?" Vance hesitated, then spoke the words he had been dreading. "We have to do what our ancestors did. We have to fight magic with magic." The room erupted into protests. Every leader, every scientist, every military commander knew what that meant. Using magic was the very thing humanity had sworn never to do. It was the reason the seals existed in the first place. But there was no other option. In the days that followed, humanity unearthed the forbidden knowledge it had buried for centuries. Ancient tomes, hidden relics, and long-lost rituals were brought back into the light. The surviving mages, descendants of those who had once wielded magic, were called upon to teach what little they knew. The plan was simple in theory but near impossible in execution. Humanity would harness enough magic to create a new seal, one powerful enough to contain the chaos spreading across the planet. But to do so, they would need to confront the forces directly, stand against the storms, the beasts, the living shadows. The Tellurians, humbled and desperate, offered their assistance. Their technology, while ineffective against magic, could still provide support. Shield generators, transport vessels, and energy amplifiers became humanity's tools in the greatest battle it had ever faced. Vance found himself on the front lines, alongside mages, soldiers, and scientists. The final seal site was in the Himalayas, at the peak of Mount Kailash, a place said to be sacred long before recorded history. It was there that the remaining magical energy would be drawn, channeled, and locked away. But the forces of chaos were not passive. As the team climbed the mountain, they were met with resistance at every turn. Wind strong enough to shatter bones, creatures that defied logic, and illusions that preyed on their deepest fears. The closer they got to the summit, the more the magic fought back. At the peak, with the storm raging around them, the final ritual began. Mages stood in a circle, chanting ancient incantations. Vance and the others worked to stabilize the Tellurian amplifiers, which were being used to contain the energy long enough to seal it. But as the ritual reached its climax, the storm intensified. A massive, shadowy figure emerged from the vortex, a being of pure magic, its form constantly shifting, its presence suffocating. It was the embodiment of chaos, the force humanity had fought so hard to suppress. The figure spoke, its voice reverberating in their minds. "You cannot contain me. You cannot control what was meant to be free." Vance stepped forward, clutching an ancient relic in his hands, a small, glowing orb said to hold the last remnants of humanity's original magic. "We're not trying to control you," he said, his voice steady despite the terror around him. "We're trying to protect everything." With a roar, the being lunged toward him. But in that moment, the mages completed the ritual. A blinding light erupted from the peak, consuming the shadow and the storm. The ground shook, and for a moment, it felt as if the world itself might break. Then, silence. When the light faded, the storm was gone. The seals were restored, stronger than ever. Magic had been contained once more, but at a cost. The Tellurians, their ships damaged and their pride shattered, left Earth in silence. They had learned their lesson. As for humanity, the events of that day were buried just as the original seals had been. The knowledge was locked away, the relics hidden, and the mages sworn to secrecy. Dr. Vance, standing on the now quiet summit of Mount Kailash, looked out at the horizon. He knew the danger wasn't gone, it never would be. But for now, the world was safe. And he could only hope that humanity, and any other race that crossed their path, would never make the same mistake again. The silence after the storm was deafening. For the first time in weeks, the world seemed still. The skies, once torn apart by raging storms of magic, now shimmered with a pale and serene blue. The winds that howled with chaotic intent had died down, leaving only a gentle breeze that brushed against Dr. Vance's weathered face as he stood at the peak of Mount Kailash. Humanity had succeeded. Against impossible odds, they had fought back the tide of chaos and restored the seals that bound magic to its prison. But as Vance gazed out across the mountain range, now bathed in the golden light of a setting sun, he felt no triumph. They had won, yes, but at what cost? The summit, which had been teeming with life just hours earlier, was now littered with the remnants of the battle. The bodies of fallen mages and soldiers lay scattered across the rocky terrain, their sacrifices etched into the mountain like scars. Among the dead were some of humanity's last descendants of the ancient magical bloodlines, people who had been forced to revive the forbidden arts to save the world, only to lose their lives in the process. Vance looked down at the small, glowing relic in his hand, the Orb of Origins, the last remnant of humanity's pure magic. It had been the key to completing the ritual, the anchor that bound the new seals in place. But now it was cracked, its light flickering faintly, like the dying embers of a once roaring fire. A voice broke his thoughts. "You did it," said a figure behind him. It was Captain Elena Reyes, a soldier who had fought alongside him throughout the campaign. Her armor was scorched, her face streaked with ash and blood, but her eyes still held a glimmer of determination. "No," Vance replied quietly. "We barely survived it." Reyes walked to his side, gazing out at the horizon with him. "Surviving is still winning. The seals are back. The magic is contained. That's all that matters." Vance shook his head. "The seals will hold, for now. But magic isn't something you can destroy. It's not something you can even truly contain. It's alive, Elena. It always finds a way to break free. And next time, we might not be able to stop it." Reyes didn't respond right away. Instead, she reached down and picked up a fragment of a broken Tellurian device, a piece of alien technology that had been instrumental in amplifying the ritual. She turned it over in her hands, her brow furrowed in thought. "The Tellurians won't be back," she said finally. "Not after this." Vance gave a bitter laugh. "Do you really think so? Arrogance is hard to kill, especially when it's coupled with curiosity. They might not return in our lifetimes, but eventually, someone will. Someone always does." Reyes frowned, tossing the fragment to the ground. "So what do we do? Just wait for the next disaster?" Vance was silent for a long time before he finally answered. "No. We prepare. We learn from this." Reyes raised an eyebrow. "Learn? Isn't that what got us into this mess in the first place?" "Yes," Vance admitted. "But ignorance isn't the answer either. We buried magic because we feared it, and in doing so, we left ourselves vulnerable. If we're going to protect the seals, we need to understand what we're protecting. We need to remember the lessons of the past, not forget them. Reyes sighed, rubbing the back of her neck. And what happens if someone uses that knowledge for the wrong reasons? Vance looked down at the orb in his hand, its faint light reflecting in his eyes. That's always the risk, isn't it? But we can't keep running from magic. The Tellurians proved that. If we don't understand it, someone else will, and they might not have the same caution we do. Reyes didn't look convinced, but she didn't argue. Instead, she gestured toward the base of the mountain, where the survivors of the mission were beginning to gather. We should head down. The world's waiting for answers. Vance nodded, slipping the orb into a pouch on his belt. As they descended the mountain together, he couldn't help but think about the weight of the responsibility now resting on their shoulders. The seals had been reforged, but they were not unbreakable. The chaos they had fought back was merely dormant, waiting for the next crack in its prison. And humanity was left to walk the fine line between knowledge and destruction. Months later. The world had changed in the aftermath of the Tellurian incident. Though the details of what had occurred atop Mount Kailash were classified, rumors spread like wildfire. Whispers of magic, ancient powers, and humanity's forbidden history seeped into every corner of the globe. Conspiracy theories flourished, and with them came a growing unease. The Tellurians had disappeared, retreating to the far reaches of the galaxy, but their brief presence on Earth had left an indelible mark. Humanity now knew it wasn't alone in the universe, and that the cosmos was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Dr. Vance had spent the months following the battle working in secrecy, assembling a team of scholars, mages, and scientists from around the world. Together, they formed the Order of the Seal, an organization dedicated to studying magic and safeguarding the seals. Their mission was twofold: to ensure the seals remained intact and to prepare humanity for the day when they might fail again. The Order operated in the shadows, its existence known only to a select few. Vance knew that revealing the truth about magic to the public would only lead to chaos. Humanity wasn't ready for that knowledge, not yet. But even within the Order, there were divisions. Some believed that magic should be embraced, that humanity's survival depended on reclaiming the power it had abandoned. Others, like Vance, argued that magic was too dangerous, that it should remain locked away forever. The debates grew more heated as the months passed. And then, one day, something happened that shattered the fragile unity of the Order. The orb's final flicker. Vance stood alone in the heart of the Order's headquarters, a hidden facility deep beneath the Earth's surface. In his hands was the Orb of Origins, its light now so faint it was barely visible. He had spent countless hours studying the relic, trying to understand its nature. The orb was a paradox, a fragment of magic that was both a key to its power and a reminder of its dangers. But as he stared at the dying light, he felt a growing sense of unease. The orb was more than just a relic. It was a warning. And it was fading. A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Reyes stepped inside, her expression grim. "We've got a problem," she said. Vance looked up, his heart sinking. "What is it?" Reyes hesitated, then handed him a tablet displaying a satellite image. It showed a remote region in Siberia, where one of the ancient seals had been buried. The ground around the site was glowing with an eerie blue light, and the air above it shimmered like a heatwave. "The seal's weakening," Reyes said. "We don't know why, but it's happening." Vance felt a chill run down his spine. He looked back at the orb, its faint light flickering like a dying star. "The seals are connected," he said quietly. "If one fails..." Reyes nodded, finishing his thought. "They all fail." Vance rose to his feet, his mind racing. The battle atop Mount Kailash had bought them time, but it hadn't solved the problem. Magic wasn't just waiting to break free, it was fighting to. And humanity's greatest battle was only